Welcome to Behind the Actions, the series that takes you on deep dives into building for Google Assistant. I'm Jessica, and today we're going to get started with the basics and build our first action using Actions Builder. We'll build a little adventure action that is set in an alternative world, where you'll be greeted by a stranger and then they'll offer to tell you your fortune. Let's explore it first. Talk to my test app.
Getting the test version of my test app.
A wondrous greeting, adventurer. Welcome to the mythical land of Griffinburg. Based on your clothes, you are not from around these lands. It looks like you're on your way to a mighty journey. Before you continue on your quest, would you like your fortune told?
Yeah, let's do it.
What do you choose to help you on your quest, a dragon, a translator, or a compass?
I want to use a dragon.
The people of Griffinburg will be awestruck by the beauty and power of the ancient dragon. Much to your dismay, the townspeople fall into dispute over who will receive the honor of riding the dragon first. You return home from your quest without everlasting glory or a dragon. That is what I see for you. Would you like to choose a different option and explore another future?
No, thank you.
It pleases me that you are satisfied with your choice. Best of luck on your quest. Farewell.
Now that we know what we're going to build, let's go over how our conversational action works. Here's a diagram of the user, Google Assistant, and your action. When a user provides input, Google Assistant processes the user's input and uses the assistant's natural language understanding to process the user's input, generally matching it to an intent, event, or slot filling. Then the assistant passes that information to your actions project. Then the action can process that and construct a prompt for the user. Your action sends that prompt to Google Assistant, and then the assistant delivers that prompt to the user. This back and forth continues till either the user or the action ends the conversation. Now let's start building the action. Okay, so here we are in the Actions console, and we're going to start off by creating a new project. And this you can call anything. This is just the project's name for the project itself. It won't be the name of your actual action. And so you could put anything in here and then create project. Great. So there's a couple of options that we could start off with. There's Smart Home, which is all about connecting hardware to Google Assistant. And there's a couple other categories, but we're going to go with Custom. So we're going to click here on Custom and then click Next. And then, of course, there's a couple of samples that you might want to try out, but we're going to just go with a blank project this time. And then start building. Cool. So this drops us into the Develop tab on the console. And in here, there's a couple of things. And so the first thing is we're in Settings. And here's where we can actually name our action. And this could change. We could change this name whenever we would like as well. So we're going to call this Fate's Fortune. Okay. And we're going to click Save. And just a few things when it comes to your display name. If you put in a name that is one word, that's invalid. If you're using names that are part of the reserve words, which there's a list on our docs, that's invalid as well. And if you're using a name that another action is using, it will flag it as an invalid name. So just a heads up, you could still use that name as you're testing and building, but it might not be available on production. So just a heads up. So let's from here go over to the left-hand side, and we're going to go to main invocation. And in here, I'm going to actually close this window first. And in here, you can see that when a user says, talk to Fate's Fortune, what's going to happen is it's going to invoke this action, which is Fate's Fortune, which is our action. And let's see what happens when it gets invoked. So I'm going to open that window back up by clicking here. And on the right-hand side, you'll see a couple things. One thing is you have an option to call your webhook here. which means you could actually be able to make a dynamic call to a web service. You'd be able to do lots of really fun things using our client library, where you could generate a prompt. You can add basic cards. You could do some database queries. You could do some dynamic things in there as well. And so you could make a call out to your webhook, and then it will return back any of those elements. Right now it has it set by default on send prompts. And what that means is you can, in this tooling, is you could add the prompts here. And you could do that in two formats. You could do that with YAML, and you could do that with JSON. And so we're going to just stick with YAML. And in here, you could see that we've already have a phrase that's already been added to here. But let's customize this for this particular action, and we'll use the power of movie magic to delete this. And then we will just paste in a greeting that we have. And this greeting goes, "A wondrous greeting, adventurer. Welcome to the mythical land of Griffinburg," which is a made-up place. "And based on your clothes, you're not from around these lands. It looks like you're on your way to a mighty journey." Looks like you're on your way. There we go. Fantastic. And we're gonna hit save, and let's test this out so we can play with it. And so after I hit save, let's go to tests. And in tests, this drops us into the simulator. And within the simulator, you could interact with the action that you're building. And this is a great way to make sure your action is doing the things you're expecting, and you can test it out before you send it out to the real world or to alpha and beta testers. So a couple of things just to note. On the left-hand side is going to be the conversation that you're having with the action. And on the right-hand side, there's going to be the history of the conversation. So you'll be able to see the back and forth logs. And then on the top, on the right, there are a couple of options that you could add as well. We're going to leave it as is for today. And first things first, we got to invoke our action. So we could do that a few ways. We can click on this text box and just click enter. We can click on this mic and it will open the mic, and you could say, "Talk to Fantasy Fate." Or you can click on the suggestion chip. So we're going to do the suggestion chip this time.
Getting the test version of Fate's Fortune.
"A wondrous greeting, adventurer. Welcome to the mythical land of Griffinburg. Based on your clothes, you are not from around these lands. It looks like you're on your way to a mighty journey."
Awesome. So it worked. Great. So as you could tell by the earcon, which is an icon for audio, is the conversation ended. And on the right-hand side, you'll be able to see that we, as the user, we said, "Talk to to Fate's Fortune." And this triggered, it invoked that action. And so Google Assistant let you know that's getting that test version. And then the action itself spoke, and then the conversation ended. So let us continue and keep building onto this conversation. And actually, based off of this, generally it's great practice, and what everyone should be doing is, when it comes to building your action, is at the end of any prompt, you want to be able to ask a question to the user for more information or for decision points. And so right now, this is not a great way to end it. I'm doing it this way because this particular portion, I'm thinking of it kind of like my greeting. This is a standalone greeting. This is where, when a user first interacts, this is where they're going to receive a "Hi, you're here, welcome." And so this is a little different than the next part of the phrase that I want to add to this, where I want to ask them, do they want their fortune to be told? And that's going to be in a scene. So let's check that out and see how that operates. So we're going to go back to develop. And in develop, what we're going to do is we're going to click on main invocation. And here we're going to actually scroll down. And here is where it says that there could be a transition. And so we can add a transition here, which means it can move to a scene. And so right now, by default, it's on end conversation, but let's make a new scene. And this scene is going to be called something fantastic. And this scene is going to be called Start. So I'm going to hit add. And what's happening here is going to add a start scene. And when this gets invoked, it's going to add this message to the prompt queue. And in the prompt queue, it's going to wait until there's the point in the kind of conversational logic where it could deliver it to the user. And so what's going to happen is going to add this prompt to the prompt queue, and then there's going to be a transition to the start scene. So you could create a start scene like we did here, or we could have clicked on the left-hand side and click this plus button and added a scene there. I'm going to hit save. And there's two ways to go into your start scene. You could go here and click on start scene, or you can click on right here in the UI. So it could turn you into the start scene. So this is our start scene, and this is the first scene that we're going to transition into when our action gets activated. And so what we're going to do here is we're going to use this start scene as the logic that's going to hold the idea of asking the user, do you even want a fortune? And be able to process if the user says yes or no. And then based out of that, it's going to do other things. And so here we're going to click on enter, which means every time that we go into the scene, on the enter portion of it, which is the first time we enter the scene, we can add a prompt. And so we could color a webhook, or we could send a prompt. And we're going to be sending a prompt this time. And with the power of the movies, we are going to grab the prompts, and then we're going to paste it in here. So my prompt is, before you continue on your quest, would you like your fortune to be told? And so that's going to be the part of the greeting, and then this is going to be tagged onto there. So this will be one message to the user. And to make it easier for the user, let's add some suggestion chips as well. So we're going to scroll down, and right here we can click on suggestions, and this will add our suggestion chips, or a suggestion chip that we can keep building off. So let's add yes, and then let's add no, and click save. Cool. So let's test this out and make sure that it's working. So let's go back to test. Okay, what we're going to do is we're going to talk to Fate's Fortune.
Let's get the test version of Fate's Fortune.
A wondrous greeting, adventurer. Welcome to the mythical land of Gryffindor. Based on your clothes, you are not from around these lands. It looks like you're on your way to a mighty journey. Before you continue on your quest, would you like your fortune told?
Sweet. So it did. So it added the two prompts together. And so now we have a decision that the user can make. And we have supported them by adding suggestion chips. So just want to know before we go any further is on the right-hand side, you could see that there's the history and the logs of what's happening, which is really great. So what we're going to do is let's try this out. Let's see if it works. Do you think it's going to work if we just click yes?
Sorry, I didn't catch that. Can you try again?
So it did it. And that's because we haven't actually told this action, or this action hasn't told Google Assistant what to expect and how to process users' input. And so let's do that. Let's actually let's tell Google Assistant how to process our information, as well as connecting that to the scene. So let's go back to develop. And in develop, what we're going to do is we are going to add intents. We are going to click on this intents, and there's already some intents made for us. These are system intents, and there is a no match, which means a user said something and Google Assistant couldn't match that to any of the intents provided. And so that's what happened when we put yes, the action was like, okay, I don't know what to do with this, because there's no other intents that yes match to. And so we get the no match intent. So I like to think of no match as like the else statement of some logic. So if none of these fit, then give this. Then there's the no input, which means that if the user doesn't say anything and it's on a device that is speaker only, after the mic gets closed, then that will be activated. And so you can actually prompt the user and respond back to the user using that. And then there's the cancel system intent, which means if the user says cancel at any time, that will get triggered and the action will close. But let's create our own intent by clicking on this plus sign, and let's make no. So we're going to hit no, type in no, and then we're going to hit enter. And now let's click on no so you can open up the no intent. And we're going to add training phrases. And these training phrases are variations of the way the user might express this no intent. And so it could be things like no. I could see people, if they're on their phone, they might just type in N, but people could say nope, I don't, nah, I don't want to, I don't want to, and other things. And so this is where you can add that variation of the way that users might express the no intent. And so let's click save. Fantastic. So let's actually add the no intent to our start scene, where that is where we had the question. So let's click back on start. And actually, before we do that, on the top over here, you can see that there's a couple of tabs. And so you can actually go back to your start by clicking up here as well. And so here is our start scene, where again, this has our question asking the user if they want their fortune told. And then that message gets delivered. And what happens with the logic of the scene is the action goes into the scene and the scene is activated, is the on enter stage is activated, where that prompt gets added to the prompt queue. Conditions are checked, slot filling is checked. And for this case, there's we don't have any, so those get processed. Then the prompt queue is delivered to the user, and that's where the user can say, can respond to the question that we asked. And so in here, we're going to add the intent of no. And so now this means that if a user says no, it's going to, this intent will be matched. And then we're going to we can call a webhook, or we can just add a prompt, and we're going to add a prompt this time. And we are going to paste in our prompt. And so when a user says no, I want to acknowledge the user. So I'm going to say, I understand, stranger. Best of luck on your quest. Farewell. So this is generally most kind of ends of conversations. You want to acknowledge and say goodbye, or some type of the opposite of hello. So let's scroll down. And what we're going to do here is we're going to add the transition to end the conversation. So now the conversation is going to end. They don't want a fortune. That's kind of the reason for this action. So we'll end it. So let's hit save. And let's test this out. Let's go to test. Let's actually restart our test. On the right-hand side, we're going to click on restart. That way it clears out all this history because we don't need it. And now let's invoke our action.
Here's the test version of Fate's Fortune.
A wondrous greeting, adventurer. Welcome to the mythical land of Griffinburg. Based on your clothes, you are not from around these lands. It looks like you're on your way to a mighty journey. Before you continue on your quest, would you like your fortune told?
And so let's try this out. Let's click no, or we could say no. No.
I understand, stranger. Best of luck on your quest. Farewell.
Fantastic. Great. This is exactly what we expected. And since we have a little bit more to play with, let's actually dive into the right-hand side where it has the logs of the conversation. And so I'm going to click on this drop-down menu or drop-down button. And what's going to happen is it's going to expand that round of conversation. And so when a user says talk to Fate's Fortune, it's going to deliver this prompt. And so under the hood, you can actually see that the start conversation gets activated, and then there is the on enter from the start scene that gets added. And so you can see here, let me go back to the interaction model. Sorry. So let's go here first. This is on the start conversation, which is that main invocation. And here you can see that we've added the greeting. That's located there. And I'm going to minimize this. And on enter, we've added the before you continue we've added that part into the response. And so after that, the action will be waiting for the user. So we're still in the start scene. And now let's open up this interaction. So when the user says no, the user's input gets processed and the input is no. And interaction has been matched. And so it goes, oh, this is matched with the no intent. And then that intent means it's going to transition you over to the end conversation, as well as bringing this, adding this prompt to the prompt queue. Let me minimize that. And then the conversation ends. And so that's when the prompt is delivered to the user, then the conversation gets ended. So that is the logs that we have in history. So you can really go into and see kind of what's happening. And you can imagine as actions get more complex, this will be really great. So you can see exactly what's going on. Great. So now let's add the yes intent. So let's add that functionality. Let's go to develop. And let me actually show you a different way of adding an intent. So I'm going to go to the start scene and I'm going to click on the plus sign for the custom intent handling. When you click on that, you can create the yes intent in here. So you can create yes and then add that. And what happens is it adds that intent, but we haven't added the training phrases. And so the intent is kind of an empty, bogus intent right now, but at least it's added. And then what we could do is we could call a webhook or we could send a prompt and transition. And so we're actually going to transition over to a new scene. And this new scene is going to be all about gathering the data of the question of, we're going to offer the user out of these 3 choices, pick one, and whichever one you pick, we're going to give you a custom fortune for that one. And so there's going to be this idea of fortune that we're going to have within the action. And so that is going to be its own scene, and that's going to manage the fortune. And so we can actually create that here too, called fortune, and hit add. And now we're going to just click save. And so right now we've made the yes intent. We have not added training phrases. And so it actually isn't valid yet. And we've made the fortune scene all in one spot. The fortune scene is also empty, but let's first do the yes intent and add that content. And so now that that's made, we're going to go on the left-hand side. We're going to click on yes. And in here, same thing. We're going to add training phrases like yes, why for a shorthand if someone's on their phone, I do, sure, of course, let's do it, and other things like that. So we're going to hit yes. And so now that intent has the training phrases. And so in the start scene, where we've added that yes intent, now is a working intent, and that will actually transition us to the fortune scene. So let's just make sure it does that. So let's click on yes. I'm sorry, let's click on test. Fantastic. We're going to restart the test. We're going to click on talk to Fate's Fortune.
Here's the test version of Fate's Fortune.
A wondrous greeting, adventurer. Welcome to the mythical land of Griffinburg. Based on your clothes, you are not from around these lands. It looks like you're on your way to a mighty journey. Before you continue on your quest, would you like your fortune told?
Let's click yes.
Sorry, Fate's Fortune isn't responding right now. Please try again soon.
And that is A-okay, but let's click on the right-hand side. And we didn't get that no match. And so something did happen. So let's click on here. The user's input gets processed, which was yes. And then that yes got matched to the yes intent. And the next scene is fortune. And what happens then is then it goes to fortune. And because there's something in there, it just ends the conversation. So let's add to it. Let's continue the conversation. So let's go back to develop. And then let us go to the fortune scene. And in here, when the user says yes, it's going to transition to the fortune scene. And what we want to do here is we want to collect data from the user. And this data is something that we're going to do with, and we're going to apply some type of logic towards. And I can see that this could potentially have multiple questions in the future. And so I'm not going to use the onEnter prompt. And that is because I want to tether the question that I'm going to ask the user to the data type that I want to pull out from the user's input. And so by doing that, we're actually going to be using slot filling. And slot filling, you could think of it kind of like a form. You want to have different pieces of data. And once you get all these pieces of data, then you're done with that scene. You could transition somewhere else. And so slot filling is all about gathering those pieces of data. And for this particular example, the data that we want to collect is to be able to ask the user, out of these 3 options, I want you to choose one of them. And we need to be able to tell and be able to process our NLU to understand that these 3 options are a thing. And so generally with slot filling, it usually is accompanied with types. And types is a way that you could tell the NLU that these particular pieces of data belong to something. And this is an idea, and this is wrapped around this concept. And so a good example is thinking of like colors. If this question was, what's your favorite color? We could create a type called colors. And in there could be the color blue and then different variations of that color, but it would all equivalent to blue color. And so the idea of the type of color would have these keys of blue, orange, green, and other elements. And so we're going to do the same thing here, where we're going to have the action ask the user, out of these 3 options, which one do you want to choose? And so now we have to first tell the NLU that there is this thing called options. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go to types, and we are going to click on that down arrow, and then click on that plus sign. And in here, we're going to call this, in particular, we're going to call this, what are we going to call this? We're going to call this available. We're going to call this available types. Available options. Options. So available options is the name of our type. And then we're going to press enter. And this will create that type. And now let's click on it so we could open up the window so we could see all the elements. And in here, there's a couple of really neat things, but we're actually going to scroll down and go down to entries. And so entries is the data that is the actual words that the user potentially could say that will reference this type. And for this particular type, we have 3 options where we want to ask the user to choose from these options. We want them to choose either a dragon, a compass, or a translator. And so we're going to be able to add that here. And so let me add that. So we'll to add that here. And so let's have compass and scroll down a bit. And as you can see, there is this key called compass, and then here are values. And so this means that these are kind of like synonyms that users potentially could say that you want to process and understand them as that key. And so for compass, I have direction, guide, navigator as well. And so these are different ways that you can reference that option. And now let's add another one. Let's add our dragon. And I could definitely see users saying something like a hydra or like a lizard, because those are other kind of in the genre of this type of game where someone might reference a dragon as a big lizard. So we have those options. And now let's add in our last option, which is translator. And with translator, what we're going to do is we're going to add communicator, machine, decoder, and then I'm going to just do translate just in case. Translate. Great. And so again, this types is a way that you can tell the NLU that there is a classification of items that we want to kind of tether and keep together. And so it's going to understand that whenever somebody says translator or any of the variations, it's going to be within this available options. And of course, this is wherever we add this type to it. This is not a broad blanket statement that it's going to know and understand that everywhere. But this is a way that we can identify that and then use that type within our scene. And so now that we have that, let's click on save and then go to our fortune scene and add this to our slot. And so again, as a user comes in, there's not going to be anything on enter. Conditions, there's none, so nothing's going to happen. And then let us add slot filling. And in here, we're going to select the type of our custom type that we made of available options. Again, those are the 3 options that we selected. There's other options here that are system types, and those have to do with like numbers and date time. So we're going to click on available options, and then let's call this chosen options, because this is the option that they chose. Okay. And then what we're going to do is we're going to select that this slot is required. And what this means is it's going to have this, it is going to be counted in this new condition that just got added. This got added when we made our slot. And what this condition is pretty much saying is if all the slots are filled, then do something. And so by making this required, it will mean that when that condition gets evaluated, it's going to count this as one of the slots that need to be filled before this could get processed or before it could do something within the if statement. But that's something that we're going to talk about in a little bit. First, let's finish our slot. So let's scroll down and we are going to send a prompt. And so this is where we're going to ask the actual question to the user. So let me copy paste this over. And what we have here is, what do you choose to help you on your quest? A dragon, a translator, or a compass, as well as some suggestion chips too. And the reason why we want the question here is because it's within the slot. And so if for some reason the slot was already filled, or we did something dynamically within our webhook before we come in and we selected that, that will allow us to not ask that question because it's not needed because we already have that data. And this also means that we can add multiple slots. And so we can add another question of favorite color, and it would be with that question of favorite color would be tethered to the slot itself. So let's click on save. And just to scroll down, just to note if there's no other options you could do below, because it is not the same as a prompt within on enter. So it's slightly different. So again, what's going to happen with the user as the first time they come in, let me minimize that. The first time they come into fortune scene, they're going to come in. There's nothing on enter, so nothing happens. And then on conditions, it's going to evaluate this. It's going to go, are all the slots filled? It's not. And so it's not going to get activated. And so then it's going to go down to the slot filling. And then within this, because chosen options is not filled, it is going to add that prompt to the prompt queue for the user. And then after that, it's going to deliver it to the user. Then the user could say some type of data point. And if they say one of the 3 options, then the slot is filled and then something's happening. And so before we test it, let's actually add in that here. So let's send prompt. And this, I want it to be you picked. And I'm going to do, session.params. And then the type name, the slot name. And then it's chosen options. So that way we could just test this out and make sure it works. So we'll click on save. And let's go test this out so we can see what's happening. So let's go to test. Let us restart our test. And then let's invoke our action.
Here's the test version of Fate's Fortune.
A wondrous greeting, adventurer. Welcome to the mythical land of Griffinburg. Based on your clothes, you are not from around these lands. It looks like you're on your way to a mighty journey. Before you continue on your quest, would you like your fortune told?
So we'll say yes. Actually, let's say yes. Yes, I do.
What do you choose to help you on your quest? A dragon, a translator, or a compass?
Fantastic. Okay, let's go with dragon.
You picked dragon.
Ah, huzzah! It worked. Yay. Okay, so that is fantastic. So that worked, but this is not really a fortune. And right now what's happening is it is just pulling out the slot that the user had, and it has matched it, and we're just making a prompt that's not really the fortune. So before we actually build that out, let us click down here and check out the logs. And so when we say, yes, I do, it prompts for the question, and it does that by transitioning over to the fortune scene, checks on enter, there's nothing there to add. It checks conditions, and the conditions they failed the first time we go in. Then after that, there's a slot that gets requested, and so the slot name is chosen options, and then we have it where the question, the prompt gets added to the prompt queue as well as their suggestion chips, and then it delivers that prompt to the user. And then it waits for the user, and we said dragon, and then let's click on here and scroll down. And so the user's query was dragon. That gets matched to the slot of chosen options. And let's scroll down some more. And then what happens is, then it validates it, so it's fine. And then what happens is it goes to conditions and it reevaluates conditions. And so it loops back up, checks conditions. Now that the slot is filled, the condition is satisfied. Now it's a true. And then it adds that prompt to the prompt queue. And then it just stays there because we haven't added it to it. So let us modify this so then we're using conditions to identify what the user says and give them the custom prompts for that fortune. So let's go over to develop, and we're going to do that in our fortune scene, and let us click on conditions. And what we're going to do is we're going to expand this statement. And so what we're going to do is we want to make sure all the slots are filled and that the user said dragon. And if they say dragon, then we're going to give them a prompt. And so let us grab that over. So let me copy paste this. So here we've kept the scene slot status equals final. And then we added this two ands, and then session params chosen options. If that equals to dragon, now what we're going to do is we're going to still send the prompt, but let's update the prompt so it could be appropriate. So let me copy and paste. And so now it's going to be the prompt for the user, or it's going to be the appropriate prompt for the dragon choice. And then let's click on save. And now what we're going to do is we are going to add in another condition. And we do that by clicking on that plus sign. And this is now an else if statement. We're going to do paste. And so it's the same thing, checking to see if all the slots are filled. And if the chosen options is translator. If it's translator, we're going to send a prompt. And let me just copy paste the prompt in here. Fantastic. And now let's add in the last condition. We do that by clicking on the plus sign. Oh, wrong plus sign. We're going to do that by clicking on the conditions plus sign. And let me grab that condition statement. Okay, again, we've left it with the checking all the slots are filled. And if the choice is compass, we are going to send a prompt. And that prompt is going to be copy and then paste it. Great. And now let's click on save. And let's test this out, make sure it works. So let's go to test. So we can go to our simulator. Great. Let's reset the test. And let's activate our action or invoke it.
Getting the test version of Fate's
We're going to click on yes.
What do you choose to help you on your quest? A dragon, a translator, or a compass?
Let's go with compass.
The compass will help you find the mystical and ancient library of Gryffindor. Among its infinite stacks of dusty books, you find one entitled Wisdom of the Ages. By the time you've read the 50,000-page tome, the townspeople have forgotten their problems. You will write a second edition of Wisdom of the Ages, but have limited commercial success.
Great. And so it worked. Fantastic. But we're not done. So what we want to do now, after the user can select the option that they want to use for their quest, we want to add this kind of next phase to the conversation. And this next phase is going to be all about it's going to be about asking the user, do you want to play again? Do you want to do this again? And so it's the same concept as a game loop, where at the end of a game, you ask the user, do you want to do this again? And so let's introduce that and have it where after the scene has the conditions that it's met for the chosen option, once that gets satisfied, it's going to add that prompt to the prompt queue, and then we'll transition to the new scene. And this new scene, most likely I'll call something like again. That way that scene, all it's responsible doing is, hey, do you want to do this again? So let's add that in. Let's click on develop. And we can make that again scene in a couple of ways. We can again click here on the new scene and make it there. Or let me click on a condition that we have. I'm going to scroll down and then we can transition and add that here. So I'm going to call this again and click save or click add. And now this is going to transition to this new again scene that is empty. And so let's actually change all of them right now and have them all point to again. And so let's click here and then click on again. And let's click on the last condition and transition to again. So we'll click save. So now that we have this new again scene, let's click on again. And so after the user chooses their option, we add their fortune to the prompt queue, then they get transitioned to this again scene. And in this again scene, the purpose of it is to ask the user, do you want to play this again? And then if they say yes, do one thing. If they say no, do another thing. And so this is going to be kind of similar to our start scene. And so we're going to use the on enter. So let's click on enter and let's add a prompt. Let me grab that prompt. Let me paste that in. Great. And let us add some suggestion chips. Oh, well, the prompt says, before you continue, I grabbed the wrong one. Let me go to the right one. Okay, so let's paste that in. Great. So in the again scene, we're going to have it where it says, that is what I see for you. So we're going to acknowledge the fortune we just gave them. Would you like to choose a different option and explore another future? So something that the reason why I have this acknowledgement here is because all three of them will have this. And by doing that, it will do it for all three of the fortunes. So that way I'm not having to write that statement multiple times. And of course, after this, we want to be able to give the user some support by adding some suggestion chips. So let's click on suggestions and let us do yes and title no. And let's click save. So when the user selects their item, their option, that prompt of the fortune gets added to the prompt queue. Then this prompt gets added to the prompt queue because they transition to the again scene. And then we're not going to add conditions. We're not going to add slots here. Then that prompt gets delivered to the user. And then the user has the option to say yes or no, ideally. And what we're going to do here is we're going to add in the same yes and no intent that we used in our start scene here, because those are generic and they're the intent themselves is not tethered to anything in particular. It's not, yes, I want my fortune now, even though it would work here in this situation. But having a generic yes or no is pretty nice because you're not having to make these intents over and over again. So let's click on the plus sign and let's add in the no intent first. And so that means if after the user gets their fortune and then we offer them if they want to choose another option and they say no, we are going to add a prompt. Let's grab that prompt. I'm going to make a little bit of an assumption here on my prompt. I'm going to have it say, it pleases me that you're satisfied with your choice. They might not be, but they don't want to play. So I'm going to assume the happy path. Best of luck on your quest and farewell. And then we're going to scroll down and then add the transition to the end conversation. And that way it ends the conversation and it closes the mic. So let's click on save. And now let's add in the yes. And so let's click on the plus sign. Let's add in the yes intent. And I believe I added, oh no, I didn't. We're going to click on the yes intent. And then what we're going to do is have it transition over to the fortune scene. And so this way, when the user says yes, transitions over, it goes to the fortune scene, and they could do that cycle again. So I'm going to click on yes. And let's test this out. Let's make sure that this all works. Let's go to test. Let's restart the action, and let's evoke it.
Here's the test version of Fate's
And I click on yes.
What do you choose to help you on your quest? A dragon, a translator, or a compass?
Let's go with dragon.
The people of Gryffindor will be awestruck by the beauty and power of the ancient dragon. Much to your dismay, the townspeople fall into dispute over who will receive the honor of riding the dragon first. You return home from your quest without everlasting glory or a dragon. That is what I see for you. Would you like to choose a different option and explore another future?
Great. Before we click yes, let's just dive into this log of when the user says dragon, what happens. So when the user says dragon, the slot gets matched. So dragon gets gets matched to the chosen options. And then if we scroll down, then the conditions get evaluated like before. And now this one is satisfied, this condition. And it's going to transition to the again scene. And it's adding this prompt to the prompt queue. And when we scroll down, now we go into the again scene. And on enter, we've added to that. And so we add that prompt from the on enter to the prompt queue. So now we have this longer prompt. And then let's scroll down. And now it's waiting for the user. So it's waiting for us. So let me make these smaller again. Or let me just make these smaller. So then we can continue. So let me click on yes, and we could see that flow.
What do you choose to help you on your quest? A dragon, a translator, or a compass?
And now we could choose something different. So actually let's do, what was the other one? Decoder. So if they say something that's not
With the help of the
value.
translator, the rival factions in Gryffindor are finally able to communicate with each other and resolve their disputes. You will complete your quest to restore peace in the town. The translator will be used on many other journeys across the earth. After its work is done, it retires honorably to a premier location in the Gryffindor History Museum. That is what I see for you. Would you like to choose a different option and explore another future?
Oh, that one's my favorite. So now let's test out the no intent to make sure that the conversation ends and that prompt gets added. So let's click no.
It pleases me that you are satisfied with your choice. Best of luck on your quest. Farewell.
Fantastic. And it closed the conversation. Perfect. So let's look at that component. So when the user says no, what happens is that no intent gets matched. And then the next scene is that end conversation scene. And it adds that prompt to the prompt queue. And it ends the conversation. And it delivers the prompt first, and then it ends the conversation. Fantastic. So I could definitely see there are some things that we can do to make this experience a little more holistic when it comes to users. And I know with testing this out and building this out, I had a couple of people where when they were on the section of asking the question of which options, they gave me, they didn't actually follow the 3 that I had provided. So let's actually go to that part of the conversation. So let's invoke the action. We're going to say yes.
What do you choose to help you on your quest? A dragon, a translator, or a compass?
And so in here, I actually had some people, they were throwing out different things. They were like, magic, I want to use gold. And they were being silly, but it did make me go, ooh, there might be users that do that. And so instead of it hitting the no match intent, where the action just goes, say it again, what we could do is we can actually address that proactively. And so when a user says something like magic or gold, we can go, hey, that's not going to help you in your quest. Choose one of the 3. That way it could gently redirect the user and support them. So let us build that out, and let's go to develop. And this is going to be part of the fortune scene. So let's talk about first where this lives. So if we're going to scroll down on our fortune scene. When the user first enters, nothing happens on enter, checks conditions. All of them get evaluate to false because it's their first time. Then they go into slots, and then that slot gets added. So that question of out of the 3 options, which one do you want? That gets added set and to the prompt queue. Then that gets delivered to the user. And at that point, the user can say, like this other type of like unavailable option, something that I know people might say that I don't have a fortune to support. And so what we're going to do is we're going to add an intent here to this particular scene. And this intent, we're going to do something a little different from our yes or no intent. What we're going to do is we are going to add in a data point of a type to that intent to use. So then the NLU can get better and more refined. And then we could tell the NLU that this is a particular piece of data. So then what we could do in our prompt, we could not just necessarily say, oh, that's not an option, but we can go, oh, gold is not an option. Choose one of the other ones. And so to do that, we're going to first start off by building another type. And this type is going to be, I'm going to think of it as the opposite of my available options. These are my unavailable options. So unavailable options. And then we're going to click on enter. And now let's click on the unavailable options. And let's scroll down and let's add some. So I have some written out here. Okay, so the first thing we talked about was magic. And so these options of magic isn't available. And I could see some people saying something like spell, something that's enchanted. That for me, I'm going to treat as all kind of like this magical space. So we've added magic, and now let's add in kind of the idea of gold. But I want to expand that more, because I want to also add in like cash, because I could see somebody saying like in modern times, I want to just use cash. So I'm going to call this money instead. So this is, or currency would be another good word too. So money, cash, gold, those are going to be the values for that key. And then let's see, another thing I could see someone saying is they want to use a horse. So let's add in some variations of horse, and that'll be stallion as well as steed. These are other ways you could say horse. And then finally, something as just to be silly is if somebody says their phone. So if somebody says, I want to use my cell phone. So we're going to use phone, cell, or apps. So if somebody wants to bring in some modern technology, we're going to acknowledge that and be like, nope. Okay, so let us click on save. And now what we're going to do is we're going to make a new intent. In this new intent, we're going to call other options. Other options. Okay, so let us click on the other options intent and let's add some training phrases. And so we'll add in, I want to ride a horse. And what happens here is the tool actually highlighted horse because it knows that horse is a special word that we've added to our types. And if we scroll down, you could see that there is a section about intent parameters. And intent parameters is pretty much types that can be added to your intents. And you can pull out data from the intents using parameters. And so what it's already done is it flagged that horse is a special thing that we've already identified, and it actually did selected the unavailable options for us already and gave us a parameter name. I'm going to change this parameter name to chosen unavailable option. That way it's a little bit more explicit for the use case that I'm doing. And if you click on the different types, there is, of course, the available options that we had prior. That's there, and then all the system intents as well. Or the system types as well. So that's one way that you could do that. And let's keep adding to our training phrases. So let's do cash, magic. I really, really want to use a phone. I want to use spells. And as we were typing those in, it was already flagged and highlighted that these words are part of the types, which is part of the parameters. And so these are our parameters for our intent. So let's click save. Now let's add this intent to our fortune scene. So let's go to fortune and let's scroll down. And of course, the first time a user comes in, there's nothing on enter. Conditions get checked, they're false, and the slot gets added. The slot prompt gets added to the prompt queue. So chosen options will get added. And at that point, if the user says something different, we want to match that. Potentially, if they say something as part of our unavailable options, we want to capture that. So we're going to add an intent to our custom intent handling and select the other options. And what we're going to do is we are going to send a prompt. So let's scroll down and let me grab that prompt. Let's paste it in here. Scroll down a little. And so this prompt says, I have seen the future and then here you can see we're using the $intent.params, which is saying we're going to get the params from the intent, and then the parameter name. So this is the name that we changed it to. And then we're using .original, which is the value that the user actually says. And so if they said gold, it will use that word gold. There is a resolved option and that will resolve to the key. And so if they use gold, it would resolve to being money. And so I want to use their actual words so it makes it feel like my action is listening to them. So again, the prompt is, I have seen the future and the unavailable option will not aid you on your journey. And if we scroll down, we are actually not going to be adding a transition to this intent. The intent's going to be matched. And what happens is because intent gets matched, conditions get reevaluated, the slots are still not filled, and then it'll add that slot prompt to the prompt queue and get to the user. So let's see how that works. So let's click on save. Let's reset our test and let's invoke our action.
Here's the test version of Fate's Fortune.
Let's click yes.
What do you choose to help you on your quest? A dragon, a translator, or a compass?
So if they said something, let's use that example of gold. So if they say gold.
I have seen the future and gold will not aid you on your journey. What do you choose to help you on your quest? A dragon, a translator, or a compass?
Fantastic. So that worked out. But let's check out the log. So let's click on the gold log and let's work through that. And so when the user says gold, the intent gets matched. So the other options get matched, that intent. And it knows that the that gold is the other options get matched, and that has a parameter of chosen unavailable option, and gold is the value of the key of money. And so this is what I was mentioning. This is the list of the values, and this is the key. And so we could use either or. But again, for this case, I want to use original. So then the user, it's using the user's words. And then, so that gets matched. And it adds to the prompt queue that message of the prompt of I've seen the future and gold will not aid in your journey. And then what happens is it goes back up to do the loop again. So it checks conditions. All the conditions are false still. We scroll down, and then it adds the prompt for chosen options to the prompt queue. And so we have the first prompt and then the second prompt. Those get added. So they're in the prompt queue. And then if we scroll down, that's what gets delivered to us, and that's what leaves us here, which is fantastic. So let me actually make this smaller. So let's try something else. What do I want to shoot? Let's say a horse. Actually, let's use this. I want to use a horse.
I have seen the future, and horse will not aid you on your journey. What do you choose to help you on your quest? A dragon, a translator, or a compass?
So it worked, but that doesn't sound right. Saying I have seen the future and horse will not aid you in your journey doesn't sound right. It should be, and a horse will not aid you in your journey. So let's make a modification here, and let's actually do this dynamically. So when this intent gets matched, let's call our webhook instead. And in our webhook, we can check to see what the user says, and then add an A into that statement if it needs it. If it doesn't, it just passes through. So let's do that by going to develop, and let's add our webhook by scrolling down, and we're going to click on webhook, and we're going to choose the inline editor, and we're going to hit confirm. And this gives us a boilerplate code for our action. And what we're going to do is we're actually going to, I have some code that we're going to add in. And so let me just paste this in. We are going to click Save Fulfillment first, and then we'll click on Deploy Fulfillment. Let's go through the code. So the first thing is we're pulling in the actions on Google's client library. And then we're also pulling in Firebase's functions client library as well. And then we're making an instance of the conversation and setting it to app. That way we can add in our handlers. So we're going to skip over 6 and 7 for right now, and let's jump down to 9. And here it is app, and we're going to be adding a handler. And this is the handler's name. And this handler is what we're going to be adding to the intent. And so when the intent gets matched, instead of using the sent prompt functionality, we're going to add a webhook call. And so we're going to add that in a bit. And what is happening here is it's passing in the conversation object, and the conversation object is the conversation that's happening, and it gets passed between Google Assistant and you. And there's a lot of interesting data points in there. You could do some really fun stuff of adding media and canvas and other elements. But for this use case, what we're going to do is we are going to check in the conversation object, the intent parameters, and we're going to be grabbing the chosen unavailable option. And we're going to grab both the original and the resolved, and we're going to set them respectively to option and option key. Again, remember, resolves whatever the user said to the key itself. And so what we're going to do is start constructing our message. And the message is, I have seen the future, and this is where we want to check. Does that particular word need an A? If it does, we'll add it. If not, we won't. And so what we have here is we're going to be checking if the word of the key, if that word is in this set that we have, that we've set up, we've created up here. And so this options needs A is a set that contains horse and phone, and because those are the two that need an A. And so if the option key that the user says. If it's that, we are going to add an A to the message. And if not, we're going to just continue and add the name, the word that the user actually used of option, as well as the remaining of the sentence. And then that message gets added to the conversation, to that conversation queue, and this web service is done. And as this is being deployed, let's grab the handler. Let's copy that and then go to the fortune scene and add that to our intent. So let's scroll down. Let's go to other option and let's unselect send prompt and click on call your webhook. And here we're going to paste in the handler name and then click save. And then let's go to tests to try it out. Okay, so let's reset our test and invoke our action.
Let's get the test.
We'll click yes.
What do you choose to help you on your quest? A dragon, a translator, or a compass?
Let's try out horse.
I have seen the future, and a horse will not aid you on your journey. What do you choose to help you on your quest? A dragon, a translator, or a compass?
Great. Okay, let's try out gold just to make sure that that works. So this shouldn't resolve to money, and it shouldn't have the A.
I have seen the future, and gold will not aid you on your journey.
Yay.
What do you choose to help you on your quest? A dragon, a translator, or a compass?
Fantastic. So that is just a walkthrough of an action and different kind of techniques that you could use. And hopefully you have a better sense of what scenes are, how to use intent, slots, parameters, how to connect to your webhook. You could do a lot more, but this is just the beginning. So I'm excited for the rest of your journey. Fantastic. If you want to learn more about using Actions Builder, check out the docs. And if you want to learn how to build using the SDK, check out our next video. Join our dev community on Reddit where you can chat with other AOG devs. And stay up to date following us on Twitter. Thanks for watching, and I can't wait to see what you build.